Played it till Saturday.
Okay, we're live here at Croke Park. Myself, Shane Stapleton. With me, I have Declan Bogue, GA journalist, based up in Ulster, so obviously has his finger on the pulse up there. Also have Phil Lanigan of the Mail here as well. We've seen what's happened with Tyrone. I'll just read out the statement and then throw it to you, lads. So first of all, this morning the Tyrone GA Management Committee has decided that it's not in a position to field its senior football team into a scheduled All-Ireland Football Championship semi-final in Croke Park on Saturday next, have received expert medical opinion on the existing and future health and welfare of the players who contracted the COVID-19 virus during the period of the last 2 weeks, and following consultation with the team's management, this decision has been made with the greatest reluctance and the deepest regret. And it goes on from there. Declan, obviously this decision wasn't taken very lightly, but we know Tyrone had cases going into the Ulster final here, also played at Croke Park. They wouldn't have wanted to do this, but I mean, what's your read on it? There's a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on it, but first off, what's your sort of read on the situation?
Well, I mean, there's an awful lot to read into the statement. The statement's detailed, but it's a sort of choice of the language, I think, is critical in it, because when it starts off saying that the management committee have reached this decision, that gives a buffer between management committee and the actual team management. And I said then the second paragraph that in consultation with team management. So I think that in some ways, if anybody was disputing it, Peter Canavan said midweek, it's half the panel, right? And there was a similar case last year where there were 17 cases of people who were unable to play for Fermanagh against Clare. Now, after that, I'd talked to some of the players and the long-term effects, and even during the winter then would have spoken to them, and some of them would have said that the effects were extreme in terms of like they lasted for months. Now, maybe a lot of the Tyrone panel are in that position at the moment now. Others might say this is a wee bit of a brinksmanship thing because they said we are not available to play on that Saturday. That to me says we want a wee bit more time, and we're just after showing before we come on air there. Brian Dooher had said another week or two. You know, we'd be grateful for that. So I think that there's a wee bit of that while I think that absolutely will not be playing next Saturday, and that's the right thing for them. But if they're given a week or two, yes, they could still play it, and I think that's basically what's going on here.
Phil Lanigan, what's your take on the situation?
I was laughing when Declan said a wee bit of brinksmanship. There's complete brinksmanship here, and looks kind of fully understandable from Tyrone's point of view. They're Ulster champions, they have pretensions for the All-Ireland, and they're credible contenders, and like they clearly, I think they're clearly in a position where there's your serious issues about player health and welfare, and I think it's a very emotive issue, a very complicated issue, and the problem for the GA is they've led the way in return to play protocols. They've actually been so good in establishing best practices. They've done everything they can, and yet here they are now in a bind with a really tough call to make to effectively throw Tyrone out of the championship. You know, it might be harsh or to award a semi-final to Kerry. So it's a really, really tough call. Personally, my gut instinct that, you know, you think saying that what happens if the GA delay, well then you could have a knock-on effect, say, for club championships. Every club team in the country will, because there's bound to be situations, could look for the same. You kind of have all sorts of precedents set there. And then the knock-on effect, say, what happens if there's a case in Kerry, you know, in a week's time? Well, then clearly, or Dublin coming up to final, you have to allow them. So it's a really, really tough one, but I would have thought we're living through completely unprecedented times, and this is a special situation. We're at a stage where the country is being vaccinated at a rate of knots, and this situation, we probably won't be here at this point again. So I think there are obviously reasons and pressure on the GA to make an exception in this case, especially when Kerry want the match. Like, that's hugely critical. If Kerry were in the other corner saying, tough luck, lads, I don't know what you were up to, but you're in this situation. But Kerry want the match, and if it was the question, they went in undercooked to an All-Ireland final and lost. They're already worrying. There's nearly more stress in Kerry. You'd swear the case was in Kerry than it was Tyrone. So look, I think the Kerry factor will play a part. If they really want the match played and want to win through to an All-Ireland final on merit, if they can, I think that has to play a part as well.
Like, in a way, like, the GA don't have a leg to stand on here. They're probably going to have to back down, because think of it in a lot of different ways. The government had to prop the GA up to play the championship. Was it something like 15 or 18 million? I think it was 15 last year. You're talking about £1 million worth of gate receipts if you get half an attendance in here. I mean, the luck of not playing an All-Ireland semi-final for not putting it back a week or two, I mean, I don't see the GA as a way around this.
Well, I mean, it's one of the things that we were all there for the press conference last June, wasn't it? A really hot day in Croke Park. And the question was asked, what is the importance of the championship? And the GA spokespeople said at that time, look, there's always been a GA championship played. Inter-county championship gets played all the time. And we take great pride in that and completing our competitions. I think the last case where teams were unable to feel like in an advanced stage of All-Ireland was maybe 1941, and beyond that maybe 1920, and when the War of Independence was in full flow. So I mean, these are strange times, and like when Brian Dooher said that they took advice of very eminent people, like I have no doubt about that. Like I would have a half an idea who that might be. These are people at the very, very top of medicine and research, and you cannot blame them for the stance they're taking. I just think that Kerry, the best thing Kerry can do at this point is say they can come out, they can have their meeting and say, you know what, we'll play you in a week, 2 weeks, we will play you.
Do you not think there also needs to be an onus on Tyrone for a level of transparency on this? Because the number of cases is clearly critical, and whatever about GDPR, a clear number, how many players actually have COVID and how many are close contact, because there's a huge distinction. Say you have half a squad, or say 16 players affected, but if 10 of them are close contacts, effectively they will be in a position to play. Their health is not going to be really impacted, whereas clearly the number of COVID cases. So I think that is really important information, and I think that would be beneficial for all parties if that's out there without getting into the personal details. But that's a really important factor in this,
Yeah, that's true, and no one can dispute that. But I just think, though, in an amateur sport like this, then that's just not going to make its way into the public domain. Like, I mean, Peter Canavan obviously has a son on the panel and made the point that it's over half the panel are isolating. Now, how many people actually have it, like, we don't know. And it would,
it's so loud in here with the music as the teams come out that it's hard to hear ourselves think. But I definitely have a couple of points to make in this. What you're saying with transparency, Phil, because like you don't have to name the names, but like, is there going to be a situation where maybe somebody independent can go in, test the players on the Tyrone panel, never name any names, but go back to the GA and say, well, look, there's 3 players here who have COVID. We even did an antigen test or whatever today. These are the guys that are actually shedding the virus. That's their, the expertise is with them. But can we not do something like that? Because, Sligo did have to opt out last year. Dublin had to play a Leinster hurling final without 4 players. So is there an element of tough luck to Tyrone? Everyone knew what was going on here. You had COVID cases after the Donegal game, missed a few people for the Ulster final. And still in all, did you keep your house in order to ensure that it didn't spread within the camp? Now, that's obviously a difficult thing to do. But you got to wonder, does some of it fall back on them and there's a bit of tough luck involved?
Well, there will be questions asked about that, and that probably is the fairest thing, that if someone independent did come in and could assess all this themselves. But then if you're asking people who are actually infected with COVID to come for another independent test, I don't know how viable that is. Like, you're asking people to leave.
The GF, their own antigen, their own screening process already in plan. Like, they had that rapid screening put together last year, which again was a very important step. The GPA looked for that. So like, those protocols are there. They can be done fairly quickly now. So look, I think the compromise, we're all guessing what's going to happen next. So, I would have thought the compromise would be a week. Brian Dooher has already mentioned a week, maybe 2. And like, that adds in the impact of, well, it gives more time. There could be a problem in Kerry. There could be a problem. So I would have thought the compromise would be give them the week's grace and see, meet in the middle that way.
And then this talk, you see some people saying, I'm not really suggesting that it's not viable, but that the likes of Monaghan get run in there in Tyrone's place. Would you see any place for that sort of conversation?
It's just highly unlikely. I just couldn't imagine a scenario where Monaghan would even be in a position to play, like, because 2 weeks off now, like, and then Banty rallying the troops for one last. I just couldn't imagine it happening. It's a nice sort of idea, but it's so left field that I just think it's impossible.
So do you see any way that this isn't just put back a couple of weeks?
Well, the GA can stick to their guns. They have had a lot of pressure on to sort the club scene, to be fair to clubs, to give that window. So they could stick to their guns. But the idea, Tyrone has put the pressure on them to effectively award the semi-final to Kerry. That's a huge, huge call. So, like, it's a really tough one for the GA. But so I would have thought the compromise will be, you initially ask for the extra week. okay, we'll give you that week, but talk of it further, it's 2 weeks or whatever you need. Like that I can't see that happening.
Just a quick one then before we finish up, lads. Dublin against Mayo, they're out on the field. What way do you see this one going, Declan?
Just without Killian O'Connor, with Brendan Harrison's on the bench there, I just think that, the whole talk is that Dublin have fell back and Mayo have progressed, and they have in some ways, but the loss of Oisin Mullen is just insurmountable in my view. Like, just purely, like, he was being talked about in terms of where the matchups were, and it wasn't even that, it was what he was going to give you from Evan Comerford's kick out, driving forward. It's gone. It's just gone from that. I kind of see a similar scoreline today as what was in the All-Ireland final last year. Was it 2-14 to 15 points? Come back to me.
Yeah, do you think it'd be something similar like that, or do you have a different thought?
I do actually. Like, it's only a month or 6 weeks ago we were talking about Conor Callan is up there with David Clifford, and after the Leinster final, you'd swear he'd forgotten how to play football, judging by some commentary, and same with Brian Fenton and James McCarthy. These are brilliant players. I'd be very surprised if those, if there's 3 big performances today, and Dublin maybe remind everybody, find a level that they've been at for a long time now.
Okay, thanks very much. Declan Bogue and Phil Lanigan. Enjoy the match, everyone.